Okay, next thing to talk about here is the state of an application, the app state, and how to persist the state, and how to pass it through to different components. We'll also talk about these sorts of things. What does a component look like in React, and when would we use different sorts of functionality that goes along with these components. So first thing let's talk about is, what do class and function React components look like, and when would you use one or the other over the other? So in our app.js, you can see that our component is being created with a function. So a function component typically has some methods, maybe some constants in the body of the function here. And then it's going to return some JSX, which is basically, some HTML that gets rendered to the virtual DOM. And then that gets rendered with the React DOM.render function over here in index.js. So function components are great for things that don't mess with the app, that don't have their own state. They can be known as stateless components. And there's this thing called React hooks out there that you should look into once you've become a little more familiar with React, about how to manage state within function component as well, because it is possible now as of React version 16. So yeah, that's a function component. Use it for simple things. You can also pass in like props and stuff. Here, I'll even have a function. Let's make one up here. So I have a function component called home, takes in a props argument, and then it will return. Here we can do the shortcut for return so you can see that. Oh, whoops. Let's do regular return. And then we'll have it return a div. H1 that has home, and then we'll have props dot children. All right, and then in here in our app component, we can return this home component, and then we'll actually send a prop that says name. And then in our home component, we'll say, my name is props.name. Okay, so you can see that I passed in some data into this home component. It looks like attributes from HTML, these are called props in React. And I've passed in my name. And you can use these curly braces or not for strings. If you have like numbers or something like that, you're going to need the curly braces for sure, or objects. So just get used to seeing these curly braces. And then in the home component, we can access that property by using props.name, and then use the curly braces as part of JSX's syntax, which is like, okay, inject this little variable into this paragraph element. Okay, so that's passing data from a parent component, in this case app, to a child component. We're going to modify our app component so that it's a class. Class app extends react.component. And a class is going to contain a couple of methods. First, you have a constructor method that calls the super constructor, which is initializing react.component with the props that are passed in. Our app doesn't have any props, but this is good practice. And then you have a state variable that is an object of key value pairs. So in this case, we can say name is David. And then I can access that state variable by doing this .state.name. This keyword means that it's a member of the class. So the class has the member variable state, which in turn contains variables inside of its object, you know. Um, oh, and then we have to get rid of this extra console log. Parsing error, unexpected token. Oh yeah, the other thing you got to do in a class component is override the render method. So the render method is where you're going to put your JSX that you return. And you can see that we have the same output now, but in this case we have this .state storing our name, which we can then change later. So quick note about this method, render. So you may have heard of the word method, you may have heard of the word function before. So functions exist outside of a class. Methods are functions within a class. So functions and methods work the same. You define them the same way. It's just method is what we call them when they're inside a class. So this is the constructor method. This is a render method. And then another method that's very important is component did mount. This is the method that's called in the application's lifecycle when render is called. In fact, I have a quick diagram to show that real quick. Poof, here's the diagram. So when this is a component's life cycle from when the JavaScript starts running the code and then till we get to the end. So the first thing that's called is the constructor method, initializing the state, and then the render method is called, which is going to take our JSX and put it into HTML. And the React updates the document object model. And then component did mount is called. And this is where you're going to put all of the data modification and data loading sort of things for your app on load. You may have seen like window.onload before in vanilla JavaScript. That's pretty much what component did mount is for. And I'm not an expert on this stuff. I'm just giving you the quick rundown. So in component did mount, we can in fact set the state, this dot set state, and then we'll change the name to be Buckley. So this is the syntax for setting the state. So you can see that the application will now have Buckley in the text. Okay, there we go. Let's see where we're at. So we've talked about some of the lifecycle methods. Component did update and component will unmount are the other two major lifecycle methods in addition to component did mount that have to do with loading and unloading data and stuff like that. These are all bundled together in the use effect hooked as of React version 16. So they all work, pretty much the same. And for now, we can just put most of our stuff in component did mount. If there's anything that you have to delete at the end, then you can put that in component will unmount when you're exiting your application. Yeah, let's keep on moving. What's the difference between function and method? We did that. How do you store variables and write methods within a React component? Okay, so storing variables in a class component is done in the state. So if I could add stuff to the state along the way, say this set state, and I could set my age, and I could even pass that in as a prop to my home component. I am props.age years old. There we go. And then to write a method in a React component, you just write it just like it looks like, you know, these methods that we've written. You don't need to put the function keyword beforehand. You can put const. You can write function expressions if you do like this, you know, where you have const. Let's see, handle name change equals name, and then this dot set state. Here's a shorthand for setting the name. If the variable passed in has the same identifier as one of your keys in the state, then you can just do like this shorthand. Just put in name. Does the same thing as name colon name. It's a little shorthand there. So maybe when we click a button on click equals this dot handle name change, change. And then if we want to access the this object, we have to do dot bind this. Let's see what we're missing. Oh, silly me, I was missing the arrow part of the arrow function. Function expression, arrow functions, the same name for this sort of syntax, you know. I could have also written the function like this. That works too. Okay, so handle name change dot bind this. Let's go ahead and set the name to be something specific. So if I say change, should update the name. My name is someone else. Cool. So that's coming up with your own method. Let's see, how do you pass data from one component to another? Use props, just like we talked about. And you can use props to pass in functions. You can use props to pass in variables. Props are immutable, meaning you can't change them inside of the function that has those props. If you want to end up changing them, then you have to pass in a handler. So I could move this button to be in the home component. Then I'd have to take this onClick function that we had, handle name change, and pass it in as a prop to our home component. And once you get like too many props going on, it's good practice to put them all on their own line like this. Okay, and then I need to change this keyword to be props up here. There we go, still works. Okay, so hopefully that helped review a little bit about React. If you have any more questions, just send me an email. Have a great day.